The light burning so brightly from our hands is destiny proving that we were fated all along. Oh, please, don't do this. I shout for the world to hear me. It is done, Adonis says as he holds me down with much force. He is dying, my soulmate and the love of my life. It feels like my whole world is crashing down. He decided without telling me. I had to find out from the enemy that he had a plan all along, and this plan did not include us ending up together. Instead, he sacrificed himself for me and our coven. My heart has been ripped out of my body completely, seeing him take his last breath. I didn't have the chance to tell him that I love him. We never got the time to say those words to each other. But I know that we both knew it anyway. We went in so many circles to find each other, afraid of hurting others' feelings. It turns out that in the end, it was only us who got hurt with barely any time spent together, a regret that would remain forever. I would never have imagined having this life, not even in my deepest fantasies. The reality that is now known as my life is far-fetched and unbelievable, but it has been my destiny since birth. Our world started 2,000 years ago, but my destiny started with Milia, my mother. That day should have never happened. It was supposed to be a day filled with celebration and love as I was turning 15. My parents would follow their weekly routine, and thereafter we would have a celebratory dinner for my birthday. Their routine was like clockwork. They would leave at daybreak once a week to find the best salmon the sea had to offer, sell the majority of it to the local Silverton markets, and keep a few pieces to themselves for special meals. I would meet them at the checkpoint that we agreed upon as soon as dawn approached. This routine of ours remained unchanged for years until the day of my birthday when dawn was approaching, but Mom and Dad did not return. The currents were strong and uneasy, so I allowed time to pass without getting worried, but when their boat returned piece by piece, I knew. It was a destructive storm that loomed over their boat, while the gods of the ocean slammed their hammers of thunder down onto them. They fought their toughest battle yet, just to keep their boat afloat. Sadly, their best was not enough that day. All control of the boat was lost, and they landed into the merciless tides of the Silverton Sea. Nature returned their lifeless bodies to shore for me to find. Healers were scarce in Silverton, only to be summoned when absolutely necessary. Their journey would have been too long, and they would have never arrived in time to save my parents. Seeing them like that froze my entire body and mind. The only thing I felt was shock and horror. Finally, denial took over as I kept on screaming for them to open their eyes. Some townspeople saw the event occurring, pleading with me to leave the scene, while they gathered the local undertaker to transport their bodies to the Silverton funeral home, but I refused. My request to them was simple: leave me be while I wait for the undertaker alone. As the night grew longer, most people made their way home until it was only me left. The shock and tremendous heartbreak must have turned into exhaustion as I was unable to keep my eyes open. The bright light of a full moon awoke me when I scanned around the area where their bodies laid hours earlier. It was empty. They were gone. The only explanation I had is that it must have been wild animals, scavenging for their next meal, who dragged their lifeless bodies away. I have never been the same after that. My mom used to describe me as a hazel-eyed girl with princess-like golden brown hair. I only allowed my hair to grow long because of my mother's request. Some people would say that my vibrant personality faded, and I became a shell of my former self after my parents' passing. And they were right. A few days after their passing, while I sat in silence, crying my eyes bloodshot red, a white messenger dove reached my doorstep. The dove carried a beautifully carved wooden heart-shaped box around its neck. Inside was a marvelously shaped copper gold pendant necklace made by Silverton's finest blacksmith, Hayden Hartswater. The necklace had an enclosed opening containing a few dry leaves from a special tree Mom and I called Amelia. Our family were never acquainted with many people, and the only true friends we had were the Bowmans. I grew up alongside Bailey, and she is the closest thing I have to call a sibling. We are like sisters. After Mom and Dad passed, the Bowmans were kind enough to take me in and raise me like their own daughter. Night terrors, sweats, and tremors awakened me night after night for the past 1,825 days, 5 years to make it less complicated. I kept having the same recurring dreams clinging to me as a demon clings to its victim. The dreams started idealistic with Mom and Dad walking beside me, smiling from ear to ear. Then they slowly fade into nothing, while the word Thornwood repeated itself until they were completely gone. I started realizing that in all truth, I never really knew my parents as people. The only thing they ever mentioned about their past, in secret, was the very same name that haunted my sleep: Thornwood. Eavesdropping was not polite in their household, and I therefore never questioned the significance of Thornwood. Turning 20 has led Theresa to question my plans for the future as I was moving into adulthood. My parents always wished for me to further my studies, but places of learning are scarce in this world, and most people will live a mediocre and uneducated life, working as artisans. This is the norm most are used to. Having the opportunity and gold to further education is a blessing to those fortunate enough. Preserving nature while modernizing the world we live in has fascinated me since childhood. The Silverton Nature Reserve is where I spent most of my time. Alongside Amelia was my happy place. Mr. Hartswater had an in-depth conversation with me, informing me that Thornwood is the center of history, with a world-renowned college specializing in history and nature. Mr. Hartswater mentioned that Red Valley College is like nothing that I have ever seen before, encouraging me to follow my heart to see what Thornwood has in store for my future. After the recurring dreams, this was the only way I could think of to make them stop. It made sense. Red Valley College only accepts a few students a year, and the price to attend the college is steep. Luckily, my parents left me a decent sum of gold to secure a comfortable future in the event of unforeseen circumstances. Bailey was also accepted into a weapons crafting course. Bailey is a brilliant weapons crafter, a skill that she has learned from her parents. The demand for weapons engineers has been on the increase in recent years. This is due to a brewing war that looms over smaller towns. The Bowmans did not speak of the war to me. They have tried to shelter me as much as they could. But I knew that a war occurring shortly was inevitable. I only wish that I knew earlier what the war meant, but nothing with the legend of Mr. Eurydice was clear from the start. The legend of Mr. Eurydice said that he was the greatest seer the world has ever known. It sounded more like a folk tale than anything else. Most humans despised the mention of his name. They hated him for the hand he played in trying to alter the future. He disappeared for thousands of years. No one knew if he was just mortal and died, leaving behind only the legend of the words he spoke and the supposed visions he saw. His name was a highly debatable subject among both humans and zodiacs. Some even mentioned that he never existed, that it was just a fiction of Hammadian's imagination, a made-up story to scare all living into fearing the future. Finding out about the Eurydice heritage took time. I had to find my truth first, and when I finally learned the entire truth, it was already too late. A new war has begun.